Lesson 2.2 Reductionism. We seek to govern complex phenomena as if they can be reduced to complicated systems. But the complicated system is constituted by a high number of individual variables give rise to phenomena that are predictable. When faced with a complicated system, it's possible to identify and understand the set of individual parts that compose it, identify its action, and with reasonable reliability, predict the effect over their interaction. With a systematic approach, we can imagine adopting effective ways of managing complicated systems and governing them quite efficiently. Instead, when faced with a complex system, it's impossible to break down the interwoven whole into elementary components without the risk of losing sight of the very natural itself and the system as a whole. Thus, a systemic or synthetic approach is necessary to try and understand the problem as a whole, treating it as indivisible. One of many contradictions in which we find ourselves is that to simplifying complex reality in an effort to govern it better, with the result of not understanding it and governing it badly. The actions taken to intervene on each of the individual parts do not enable us to address the problem. In this sense are explained failures in taking decisions of implementing solutions to address a problem that are underpinned by the principle of abstraction based on abstract models. Hypothesized theoretical models rarely find confirmation in the manifestation of a phenomenon, and when they do, it's likely that our interpretation of the outcomes are conditioned by self-confirming expectations that always lie in way. Thus, we see the inadequacy of interpretive schemes based on modeling, and it has traditionally been conceived and utilized. It has long been the custom to construct models a priori, based on interpretive assumptions to be applied to experience. They have proven more useful as an exercise in analysis and descriptive argumentation. By contrary, they haven't proven useful as in steering the interpretation of phenomena and decision-making on the solution to be adopted. The reductionist approach proves similarly defective in its application to new cases of new phenomena, of model based on the reconstruction of tried and tested experience of success. Such an approach includes the use of the concept of best practices. The use of best practices have generated endless critical problems and difficulties in the introduction of innovative processes based on the reuse or readaptation of what was successfully achieved in the other situation. The best practice approach is based on the idea of making the most of successful experience by reconstructing the dynamics that emerge, modeling them, and reproposing the past experience as more or less cogent guideline for action. While certainly widespread, this approach is tautologically flawed by the belief that a model built from an ex-post reconstruction is a model that works. Because the model being so effective in dealing the kind of issue is solved, it can be reapplied to other situations. In this way, best practice have damaged process for the introduction of innovation in different contexts. They have justified an attempt to standardize the different roads that lead to innovation. Then they have generated rejection effects of the innovation in the various contexts in which they were introduced. Not being able to rely on the outcomes of others' experience in steering our own actions is of course destabilizing. We are accustomed to look into the past to draw lessons on the behavior we should adopt. In highly complex contexts, however, the past doesn't determine the present. We have difficulty in understanding the phenomena that are unfolding in present. Very often we aren't able to read and know the past. The crisis of classical determinism, the implication of quantum mechanism, or more recently, the utilization connected with complex systems and chaotic phenomena, have formed the basis for a new model of awareness for interpret and addresses the challenge. My point here is not to deny in any absolute way the value of looking back to the past, but rather to underscore how increasingly what we have understood and acquired from the past should not be interpreted as the determinant of present reality. On the contrary, it may constitute an element that circumscribes and limits within closer than predefined context our capacity for action. In this sense, focusing on the past represents the most critical and limiting factor for our ability to think out of the box and trigger innovative processes. Remaining fossilized in the past and thinking in a contingent mode represented major biases in addressing highly complex contemporary phenomena. We are gripped by major contradiction on the temporal plane. We need to understand the evolutionary prospect that will happen in the medium-long term. But we need to analyze and act in the nearest of terms that is a few months in relation to transformative dynamics that have reached paroxysmal levels. Thus, we have the problem of shifting our focus from the contingent plane to adopt a view that combines and intervenes on all the different dimensions. The reality we live in is complex.